Hello everyone, welcome back to Shimna Study Corner. In this video, we are going to deal with part 2 of the first chapter in your Hornbill textbook titled The Portrait of a Lady. In the video dealing with the first part of the same chapter, we have already seen how strong the bond was between the narrator and his grandmother. When they lived in the village, their companionship was too strong. Towards the end of the previous video, we have already seen that they have shifted to the city to live along with the narrator's father and mother. Let us now go through the rest of the part of the chapter. The part we are going to deal with now tells us how their relationship changed drastically after the shift into the city. As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught me at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lurid associations. It was a monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing, but a silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. This paragraph actually tells us all the reasons due to which the grandmother had a drift from the grandchild. The grandmother actually continued to wake him up and get him ready for school. After he returned from the school, she would usually ask him as to what were taught that particular day by the teacher. The boy would innocently reply to these questions of hers. He would tell that he had already learned English words and little things of Western science, which included law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. All these descriptions of the new things that he had learned actually made the grandmother unhappy. What were the reasons for her unhappiness? First of all, she could not help the little boy with any of these lessons like she used to do earlier, because earlier he studied things which she knew about, but now he studied all the lessons which she was unaware of. And moreover, she did not believe in all these things that they taught in English school, and she was also unhappy because there were no lessons about God and scriptures in this new English school. One day, the little boy also told at home that he and his friends were being given music lessons. This disturbed her very much because, according to her, music had lewd associations. The meaning of the word lewd is offensive in a sexual way. That is the meaning of the word lewd. So she considered music to have such associations, and she believed that music was actually the monopoly or right of harlots, which means prostitutes and beggars. She felt that music was not meant for gentle folk or cultured people like her and her family members. But though she had all these going on in her mind, she did not say anything against all these, but her silence clearly meant that she disapproved of all these proceedings. After this incident, she actually stopped talking to her grandson. Let's go through the next paragraph. When I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders. Some even sat on her head. She smiled but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. In this paragraph, we move a little bit forward, and now the little grandson has actually grown up and he is going into a university for his higher studies. So, when he became a university student, he was given a room of his own, which means that till then he was sharing a room with his grandmother. But now, when he is grown up, he is given an individual room, and he says that this action was like snapping a common link of friendship that existed between them. Now, the only link of friendship that existed between him and his grandmother was the same room that they shared. Now, by the time he reached university, that last link of friendship was also snapped. And it seemed that his grandmother accepted her seclusion, or the situation of being isolated, with resignation. Resignation means the acceptance of something undesirable but inevitable. So she was ready to accept her seclusion with resignation, and after that, she rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. The only pastime, or the one among the very few pastimes that she had, was to spend time on her spinning wheel. So she started spending most of her time on her spinning wheel. Right from sunrise to the sunset, she sat by the wheel and worked on it, and she recited her prayers. And the only thing that she did other than that was in the afternoon when she fed the sparrows. She usually sat in the veranda, breaking pieces of bread into little bits, and there were hundreds of little birds which gathered around her so that they could eat. And the noise made by the birds are compared to a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. The meaning of the word bedlam is a scene of uproar and confusion. So this means that literally the scene was an uproar when hundreds of birds gathered to eat the breadcrumbs from the grandmother. And many of these birds came and sat on her legs or on her shoulders and even on her head. It seems that she enjoyed the company of the birds because she smiled and never shooed them away. And the narrator describes this half an hour per day as the happiest time of her life. Moving on to the next paragraph. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. Now, again in the next paragraph, we see that the boy has completed his graduation and he had decided to go abroad for his further studies. And he believed that his grandmother would be really upset at his departure because he would be away for 5 years, and he was unsure if he could meet her when he returns because she was aged and there are chances that he would never meet her again. But he says that his grandmother did not seem to have any such concerns. She was not even sentimental when he left. She also accompanied his family to the railway station so that she could see him off. But she did not talk, nor did she show any emotion. She was completely engrossed in her prayer. Her lips moved in her prayer, and her mind was lost in prayer, and she was continuously telling the beads of her rosary. She kissed his forehead, and when he left, he cherished the moist imprint of her kiss because he felt that that might be the last sign of physical contact between them, because he was not sure if his grandmother would be alive when he returned after 5 years to have such a physical contact once more. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum and sang of homecoming of warriors. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. But that moist imprint of her kiss was actually not the last sign of physical contact between them, because when the grandson returned after his studies after 5 years, she was still there at the station to meet him. And he says that she did not look even a day older after these 5 years. She had not changed in any aspect. She still had no time for words because the whole time she spent by reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of his arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows. She fed them even for longer intervals now, and now and then she rebuked them frivolously. Frivolous means not having any serious purpose or value. Rebukes means scoldings. In the evening, a change came over her. In the evening of his arrival on the very same day, by evening, there was a change which came over her. She stopped praying. Instead, she collected the women of the neighborhood. She gathered all of them, and she also got hold of an old drum, and she started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of the dilapidated drum. The skin of the drum was hanging loose, and the drum was in ruins because of age or neglect. So it was a very old drum with sagging skins. She thumped on that drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. Finally, the family members had to persuade her to stop so that she wouldn't overstrain herself. And the narrator says that, or rather, he admits that it was the first time since he had known her that she did not pray. All these years, whenever he saw her, she was completely engrossed in prayers. But that was the very first time when he saw her do something else other than pray. The next morning, she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. We protested, but she ignored our protests. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving, and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. After that eventful evening, the next morning, she was taken ill. The grandmother fell ill the next morning. The doctor diagnosed it to be a mild fever and told that she would be all right. But that was not what the grandmother felt. The grandmother was pretty sure that she was going to die. She told her family members that there were only a few hours before her death, and therefore she would spend the rest of the time praying, because she had refused or she had neglected the prayers for a few hours just on the previous day. So she decides to spend the rest of the time praying. The family was not very happy with this prospect, but the grandmother ignored all their protests. She lay peacefully in her bed and she started telling her beads. And After some time, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers, which suggests that she died. And then a peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. The meaning of the word pallor is an unhealthy, pale appearance. So, with that appearance, the family members understands that the grandmother had passed away. Moving on to the very last paragraph of this chapter, we lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard. All over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff, wrapped in the red shroud, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirruping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little crumbs, the way my grandmother used to, and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. After her death, as it was the custom, they lifted her off the bed and laid her on the ground. Then they covered her with a red shroud. Shroud means cloth. After a few hours of lamenting her death, the family members left her to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, they went back to her room with a basically made stretcher to take her for her last rites. The sun was going down. In her room and veranda, there was a shine of the golden sunlight. They stopped in the courtyard. This was because they witnessed something very special in her room at that time. All over the veranda and in her room till the place where her corpse lay, it was covered with thousands of sparrows. They were sitting on the floor very silently. They felt sorry for the birds because it was their grandmother who used to feed them. Seeing this, the narrator's mother brought some bread for them. She broke it into small pieces like the grandmother used to do and gave it to them. But the sparrows were not there for the food. They took no notice of the bread. Then the grandmother's corpse was carried away for the last rites. Once the body was carried away, the sparrows flew away silently without touching the breadcrumbs. They had to be swept off the next morning by the sweeper. This indicates that the sparrows were also lamenting for their dead and lost friend. With this, we come to an end of this chapter. Hope this video has been useful to you. We'll meet in the next video with a different lesson. Thank you.